Okay, so welcome everyone to our workshop. So I'm Rebecca Goodchild. I'm a librarian here at Sacramento City College, and I'm also a City College Union rep. Belinda, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Belinda Lum. I'm SCC's LRCFT president and the union's chief negotiator, and we'll be co-presenting with Rebecca today. So,
Cool. And Michael, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. Michael Henderson. I'm staff for the union, the executive director. I'm not a faculty member. I work for the union and for all of you folks. So nice to see you all here today.
All right, great. Okay, so I always find it tricky to do the slideshow well on Zoom, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay. Okay, can everyone see it correctly? All right, looks all right.
no, actually, we're seeing your speaker screen.
Okay, let's stop that and try it again. Okay, let's try that one. How's that?
Good.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Yes? All right, let me know if it goes awry at any point. Okay, so here's the quick agenda for today. Again, you'll be provided with all these slides by email, and then Belinda's put them in the chat as well. So just a few things that we're going to cover here, responsibilities, timelines, some of the documents you have to submit, preemptory challenge, submits, accessibility, and then lots of question and answer period of time. Okay, so we're going to actually read this to you. I know it'll be the only slide that I plan to read the entire thing to you, but it is the purpose of performance review, just so we have a clear basis of where we're started. So the primary goal of faculty performance review is to improve the quality of the educational program. The process should promote professionalism, encourage reflection, enhance performance, and be effective in yielding a genuinely useful and substantive assessment of performance. To achieve this goal, it is necessary to identify, recognize, and nurture excellence, to identify standard performance, to encourage regular and substantive faculty-student interaction, and to indicate areas where improvement is necessary or desirable. While formal performance review, as described in this article, occurs on a cyclical basis, informal review by colleagues and supervisors occurs on a continuous basis, and as such, communication should also be continuous. This is directly out of the contract. It is section 8.1 of the contract. Basically, we want to be awesome teachers and to support our colleagues in doing so. So some of the responsibilities of faculty under review. Okay, so these are basically turning in things when you need to, going to meetings, trying to be as available and communicative as possible, kind, thoughtful, all the things I'm sure all of you are already doing. For faculty reviewers, so the big one is confidentiality. You don't want to talk about the process with people outside of your team. You want to keep it as private as possible so that it can be fair for the person that you're reviewing. Okay, there needs to be clarity about what you are allowed to review, which we're going to go over in a bit more detail throughout this presentation. You need to, provide your dean with the evaluation in a timely manner. So basically the same thing as the faculty under review. You need to do your homework, turn it in on time. Okay. And then if you have any recommendations, that especially for less than satisfactory, you need to provide evidence for that. So if you have a strong suspicion of something, or you need to actually back that up with evidence. So just keep that in mind. If there's something that you feel is strongly about bringing forward, you need to have evidence. Okay. There's a difference between a recommendation versus a suggestion. So a recommendation is an official thing that someone has to address in their next review, and a suggestion is just like a tip or something that they could work on, things that they could improve upon, but are not like official, red alert, you need to do something about this thing. Okay. And then most important, of course, is adhering to the LRCFT collective bargaining agreement, which outlines all of the rules for this process, which we will continue to go into more detail about. All right, so the timelines, we're not going to go on a point-by-point basis on this, but we've put on this slide where you can find the timeline calendar of expectations. It's basically when your dean is going to tell you, hey, you need to meet for the pre-performance review, and then when people are going to do workstation observations, when all your stuff is due, all your homework, what weeks that is due. So if you have questions about that, you can of course ask us, but you can go review those in the contract. All right, know your rights. You're going to see KYR a lot. This is our attempt to help you feel empowered with awesomeness and all the things you can do for this review cycle. So you need to know what you need to turn in. You need to know what your homework is. So we have a self-study. You are required to respond to recommendations only from your previous cycle if you've been reviewed before, like if you're a tenured track person, or you're in your second, third, fourth year as or even an adjunct. If you have any recommendations, you need to address those. Okay, you do not have to address suggestions in the self-study. Okay. The equity reflection, so you have to do it, but it cannot be used in the peer review process. So basically, a team can read it, reflect on it, maybe discuss things with you about it, but they cannot use it as part of the review. It just needs to be there, essentially. Both of those need to be completed and emailed to your dean by the end of week 6. So this is week 3, I believe. So you got 3 more weeks to go. Okay, student reviews. Okay, so it is past week 2. So if you have not talked to your dean, they are defaulted already to online reviews only. If you wanted in-person reviews, then hopefully you talk to your dean about that and have received in-person reviews as well as online ones. So just to know that maybe next time, if you really don't want online reviews or you do just want in-person reviews, I believe for those classes, you'd have to ask really early in the review process. Okay, so student reviews taken alone may not lead to a less than satisfactory review. So if you look at their student reviews, there was a bad day, they said some crazy stuff, they can't use that alone as a way to give you less than satisfactory. However, if there are things in the student review that substantiate some of your observations from the workstation review, or there's some kind of other complaint or investigation going on that is also reflected in the student reviews, they can be used as evidence. Okay, so again, alone, by themselves alone, they cannot be used for a less than satisfactory review. All right, Belinda.
We will switch off now. So one thing to note is that tenure track, tenured faculty, and part-time faculty have what we call a peremptory challenge, where you are allowed to remove a faculty reviewer from your team. You cannot remove your dean. Let me just preempt the question that often comes up here. But there are very specific rules that change based on the category you're in. So if you are a tenure track faculty member, you can use your peremptory review only once during years 2 through 4. As I noted, you can only use it to remove a faculty member. So when you want to remove the faculty member from your team, you email your campus's academic senate president. So for Sacramento City College, that's Sandra Guzman. For FLC, it's Eric Wada. From Consumnes River College, it's Jacob, and I just forgot his last name, but we'll get it to you. We'll put that on the info sheet. And then American River College, it's Brian Knurk. But you would email the academic senate president directly, and you actually do not need to give a reason for why you're removing the faculty member. All you need to write is, I wish to exercise my peremptory challenge and remove, and then put their name from my committee. And so you can exercise the peremptory challenge within 3 weeks of being notified by the academic senate president's approval of the peer review team. So what's been happening literally probably over last week and this week, or the end of this week, the senate presidents have been approving the committees, and then you were notified, should be notified by your dean. So that's when the clock starts. Some deans historically have tried to start the clock when they tell you who your team is before the Senate president's approval. That is not correct. The clock starts when the Senate president approves. Also note that when you exercise your peremptory challenge, it is the Senate president's job, in consultation, usually with the dean and or chair, although it's just a recommendation and a consultation, to replace the member. So note that that the Senate president is not under any contractual obligation to use the suggestions, but they will consult. And then finally, what's important to note, because I know that we have a lot of folks here, I just was eyeballing the participants here, who are long-term temps, LTTs, and then tenure track faculty in their very first year, you cannot exercise a challenge. So you do not have a peremptory challenge in your first year. So those are the conditions for the tenure track faculty. If you can forward to the next slide for me, Rebecca. For tenured faculty, after you receive tenure, you're then reviewed every 3 years unless you unless your committee has come back with an off-cycle review, saying that we believe in a year you need to be reviewed as one of the recommendations, or if you are subject to a special review. But basically, the majority of our faculty undergo a procedure A or B review, and your first one after you're tenured is a procedure A, which means you do the full review with your self-study, classroom observation, equity reflection, etc. Procedure B still requires the documents but no classroom observations. But tenured faculty can use their peremptory challenge during every review cycle. And again, the process is the same. You email the Senate president. The Senate president replaces the removed faculty member. And this must be exercised within 3 weeks of being notified by the academic Senate president. Go ahead to the next slide for me. Oh, part-time, you already, for part-time faculty, and this is new to our contract. So this was something that was newly negotiated by our team this last spring. Part-time faculty now have, part-time faculty cannot use their peremptory challenge during the very first review, which means if you're a new part-timer, you don't have a challenge. However, after that first review, part-time faculty can use their peremptory challenge during all other review cycles. Part-time faculty are reviewed every 3 years. And you should note that that 3-year clock is based on the campus. So if you are a part-time faculty member that hypothetically started at Sacramento City College in 2022, and you go up for a review in 2025, and then you started in 2023 at American River College, your ARC clock starts in 2023. So these are, just note that you may be on multiple different calendars if you are a part-time faculty member, and you should ask your area dean when you're scheduled for review. When part-time faculty exercise their peremptory challenge, the process is again the same as the other 2 categories. You email your Senate president, the Senate president replaces the removed faculty member, and it can be exercised only within the 3 weeks of being notified of the Senate president's approval of the review team. These timelines are really important. You cannot exercise it after the fact. And again, the only other way in which folks have been removed outside of a peremptory challenge is with demonstrated evidence of bias. That is written in our performance review, Article 8, and the threshold to prove that is actually relatively steep. But if you believe that you are facing those types of some sort of bias or discrimination, you should contact your campus president to discuss that as soon as possible. Are there any questions, Michael, that we need to answer in the chat?
I've answered a couple in the chat itself. One about special reviews. I noted that they're very unusual, but anyone who has one has to be informed about it beforehand. And one about the rule regarding allowing student evaluations only as if it's corroborated by other evidence. That's a Los Rios thing, something we've negotiated. The Education Code does require student evaluations as part of faculty performance review, but exactly how student reviews work is negotiated at the local level by individual districts. And someone's just asked, when did the peremptory clause begin for adjuncts? We're happy to announce we just negotiated that in the most recent round of negotiations. In fact, this is the first semester, Michelle, that it's in effect.
As of right now, we do not. I do not. Michael, do you remember? I don't think you could add a part-time faculty member to the review
No,
team.
you can't request anyone specific. You can remove somebody, but you can't determine who the replacement is. Just one thing on the peremptory challenges too. It sort of occurred to me recently that we might want to talk with the district next time around about peremptory challenges and LTTs, because given that peremptory challenges are designed to sort of be a sort of an escape valve for pre-existing tensions, the fact that so many LTTs come from our part-time ranks means that maybe they should have a right to a peremptory challenge too, but they do not currently, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say that the current circumstances that we've been in the last 3 years, we've had a ridiculously high number of long-term temps. As I noted, we have 52 across the district this semester. Normally it used to just be like one per campus in a given semester, and normally just to replace, like if someone went on a sabbatical or someone went on leave. This is really an unusually high number, in that the majority of them are to meet enrollment needs. So this is kind of a new dynamic, and so it's created the necessity, as Michael noted, for us to go back to the drawing board a little bit for LTTs. So, but the reviewers, but my going back to Julie's question is that currently under the contract, it is a full-time faculty member that reviews. We had tried to get a preferenced part-time faculty member in, but I believe we were unsuccessful this last time, Michael, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's right.
And so really it's the full-time faculty who are reviewing. And so, but it's not for lack of trying in trying to negotiate that. So it is a full-time faculty member that reviews. And the difference between part-time and full-time is that part-time faculty only have one faculty reviewer. You have two faculty reviewers in tenure track and LTT reviews.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Can we go to the next slide? So workstation.
Belinda, sorry, can I just say so? There's nothing actually prohibiting an adjunct from being a reviewer, but we can't demand one, and the contract doesn't mandate one.
Thank you. Perfect. So, so in terms of workstation reviews, it must follow the rules as listed in the contract. And I think that there are a few things that are important to note here. And I'm going to try to scroll back to Heiki's question as well a little bit earlier here. But in terms of the workstation reviews, for instructional faculty, is conducted between weeks 6 and 15. It should be noted that the dates need to be mutually agreed upon. So in your pre-meeting, and I believe someone had emailed me a question about this, in your pre-meeting with your dean and your team, they typically establish the dates that you want to have to be reviewed. Everyone does it slightly differently. So I just want to note that. So some deans will say, hey, Belinda, arrange with, with Nick Miller for when he's going to come into your classroom, pick the date and be very clear and send me the date. Other deans are much more, I'm going to call it prescriptive, like, and how it actually runs in my division is, okay, Belinda and Nick, pull out your calendars during this pre-meeting, choose the date in which Nick will come into your class and review you. So one of the suggestions I have for the pre-meeting for everybody is that you should take a look at your syllabus. And this is for both online and in-person workstation reviews, and pick what you think is going to be the demonstration of your best work. So I know a lot of us have an understanding of there are particular lectures that we do or particular lessons that we do that show off our best qualities. My recommendation is to schedule your workstation reviews around those 3, 4, or 5 types of lectures that you get. Some of you are uniformly great across the board, and so you can pick any day and it's fine, but But the dates are mutually agreed upon, so it could be, and it always happens between 6 and 15. Traditionally speaking, most of us will not schedule during the week of midterms, or if you know you're going to be giving a midterm back, sometimes we give a little space there, but you do have some autonomy to say yes or no. They can't just say, I can't just say, hey, Rebecca, I'm coming on September 16th. Be ready. It needs to be mutually agreed upon. In terms of online reviews for Canvas, the reviewer, they are added in the reviewer role in Canvas for 7 days, right? This is a mutually agreed upon time period, and the reviewers are responsible for only reviewing the week or the module that you're teaching that week. They cannot, and then any, I would say, any public facing type of announcements or your syllabus, which you would have already sent them your syllabus anyways. So they cannot go see everything in the kitchen sink, as my predecessor Casey Boylan used to say. They are supposed to stay confined to your module for that week. If comments come up in your review from outside that week, you should contact your union president or union rep. This is something that we would have removed or question the veracity of why it's there. If it's associated, if their comments are associated specifically with the syllabus, that's fair game. But if they're saying it's part of your workstation review, and that they looked at weeks 2, 12, and 13, that is not okay. For hybrid classes, there is some flexibility here, and I think that it's often best to schedule it relative to kind of your pedagogical approach to teaching. So, for example, one of my colleagues in chemistry uses what we call a flipped classroom model, and so all the lectures are online, and her in-person part is more kind of study session and less a demonstration of her teaching. In that particular case, it may make most sense for her, again, to follow the online Canvas for 7 days observation, so that they can get an understanding of her content expertise, et cetera, and follow the online rules. However, if you are someone who may reverse that and do a lot of lecture in your class on the one day you're in person, and then there's more discussion online, what you may want to do is have them come to the in-person. And if you feel it's necessary, you can provide samples of what the students do to respond. So there is some flexibility, and we highly recommend that you discuss this in your pre-meeting, and again, it should be mutually agreed upon. There should be no surprises. They can't just demand one or another, but there should be some discussion as to why. And I would tell you that it should always be affiliated with your particular approach.
Belinda,
yes.
just a couple of questions have come up. I'd like you to confirm this. Walter asked, reviewers only see what students see, right? And I've said, yes, that's our intention, but it's not always been quite that way in practice, right?
Not necessarily. So for some of us in Canvas, we use small groups, like we have group sections. And if you're in a student role, you can't bounce from group to group. So they have a specific role that's called reviewer. They're able to move from group to group if you have small groups set up. They're not able to see anything that's not published, but they will be able to see anything that's published. So if they come in week 7, they could potentially see weeks 1 through 6. Some of my colleagues, I'm going to say, depending on the politics of their department, some of them have no problem leaving all of their modules open, and with the understanding that they should only be looking at week 7. Others, because let's just say it's a more acrimonious environment, have opted to unpublish all the weeks before, and only have published the week under review. That is completely your decision as the faculty member as to how comfortable you feel leaving everything open or not. But your only contractual obligation is to show the week under review. But they are, like I said, depending on how you have your Canvas set up, they can bounce back and forth between things. They will not be able to see grades. They will look at discussion boards. They may also be able to look at assignments, but and again, it depends on the setup within Canvas.
Also, Stacy asked about how many classes are reviewed, and she was asking about student reviews and workstation observations. That varies a little bit between the different three classes of faculty. For example, with workstation observations for tenure track, there have to be a minimum of three direct workstation observations, and the idea, where possible, is that they should include different types of course preparation. And for tenure track, student reviews in a minimum of 3 classes. And for all types of faculty, student reviews should be done one for each class preparation wherever that's practicable. And just as a general recommendation here, I know that some faculty avoid it like the plague because it's incredibly boring to read, and I understand that, but it is a good idea to read the relevant section of the contract for your review. And it's just one part of one article. So 8.6 for tenure track, 8.7 for tenured, 8.8 for adjunct. It's fairly straightforward language, and yeah, I highly recommend anyone being reviewed to read the relevant section, even if you've been to this workshop.
One thing I do want to note, and this is and I think for part-time faculty, it's usually one class, like one of your assignments, and for full-time faculty, it should be your classes that are in load. So not your overload, but your in load classes. This is for instructional faculty. I think it's also important to note, again, it's mutually agreed upon. We've had instances where a faculty reviewer wanted a do-over because they didn't see something specific. It is, again, not allowable by contract. But I would also just tell you, if some part of your instincts are telling you this doesn't feel right, contact one of your union reps so that we can try to get the answer for you. Don't suffer in silence. It's really the only way that we can enforce the contract is if we know what's happening. With counselors, coordinators, and librarians, if you are working any portion of your load remote, you will, part of your workstation evaluation may be, actually should be, your sessions that you do remotely. Now, it's going to look different for librarians, so they may be working a virtual desk, right? And I'm going to let Rebecca talk about librarians because I'm making things up and she knows it. But for counselors, for example, before the appointment, they would usually tell somebody, you know, I'm under a review, and you know, Michael's will be in our session today. Is that okay? If the student says no, then the reviewer would exit. But it also, again, with the counselors, it's a little bit different in terms of, in terms of the privacy, FERPA, all the different laws there. For coordinators, again, coordinators is sort of this bucket that has a lot of different types of coordinators. So we have counseling coordinators, so you may be evaluated both in terms of your counseling side and also be asked about the coordination work you do. We have some coordinators that, I think I saw Brian Pogue in the room, who do a lot of kind of different online work. So the observations of your workstation should, again, be about a specific work product. It could also be about it could be a particular set of interactions or a training session that you do, but again, mutually agreed upon ahead of time. Did I catch most of the questions there in terms of the workstation reviews?
Yeah, I think you're good now.
Okay, well, we go to the next one, and there's time for questions at the end as it comes up as well. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so common misconceptions. Reviewers can come into your class, works observation whenever they want. Again, no, it must be a mutually agreed upon time and date. If anyone just checks into your class, please let your union rep know. Okay, if you're surprised, there's something wrong. Okay. Myth 2, reviewers can opt to do more than one workstation review if they didn't see anything they want. Again, no, it has to be they have to agree upon it with you. You cannot go hunting for what you want to see. And then myth 3, in an online Canvas review, the reviewer can see all of your class modules. So again, no, the contract only allows reviewers to look at the week under review and the public facing pages. So the published pages in Canvas. Okay. Faculty under review should remove the reviewer when the 7-day period expires. Yeah, pretty clear, I think.
All right, so let's talk accessibility. There's been a lot of questions about what is and is not allowed around accessibility in a faculty review. So first and foremost is that faculty have the professional obligation to meet student accommodations that have been noted in the faculty notification letter that is supplied by DSPS. For those of us who are instructional faculty, it's largely been emailed to us. Pre-pandemic, we used to get the letter with the blue, it used to be a blue cover letter over at City College, but it very explicitly states that student X needs 2 times or double the time on quizzes, or may need to record your lecture. We must comply with those letters, and it is part of our professional obligations. Now, that being said, we have an accessibility committee that worked throughout the summer and even last spring. And what we've been seeing across the district is what we consider to be a broad scale overreach of what is being evaluated. And this is occurring for a lot of different reasons. It's happening, I think, because some folks don't understand what specifically you could be evaluated in terms of accessibility. Some folks have been giving their own interpretations, but I'll go through some of that. Faculty reviewers may not give recommendations and or rankings of less than satisfactory for general accessibility work for in-person or online classes. So for example, they cannot say you are required to closed caption your lecture. They cannot say you used the wrong font and you must change it. All of those are not allowable on your review. And if it comes up, you should immediately send the review over to the union presidents. Can we go to the next slide? I think we have a little bit more on accessibility there. So some areas where we've seen the overreach happen tends to be in the evaluation of 3 very specific articles. And there's we're using the ones right now, or for the tenure, I think 8.4 is our tenure, our pre-tenure faculty, but the what do you call it? It may be slightly differently numbered based on being coordinator or or a counselor or a tenured faculty, but the language is the same. Some have falsely interpreted 8.4.1.3 adjusts methodologies for students with diverse and or special needs and or different learning styles to be an accessibility standard. This is not true. Accessibility is not a methodology, right? It's not a style of teaching. It is not a way in which we choose to present scholarly information. And so by extension, an individual cannot be negatively evaluated for accessibility under this article. This analysis also applies to 8415, interacts with students and colleagues across employee groups with dignity and respect, or 8416, promotes an inclusive classroom or workplace environment that is free from harassment, prejudice, or bias. So these particular articles, right, it is not up for the faculty reviewers or deans who are reviewing to spin it to meet their needs. These are meant to measure very specific things like interactions. Like if you've been going around the hallways making very sexist remarks, then you should be written up under 8415. Same thing with 8416. In terms, if you've mistreated your admin assistant, again, 8415, this is not meant for loose interpretation. If you receive comments on accessibility, these types of comments on accessibility, so sometimes it'll just come up under recommendations without a less than satisfactory ranking on anything. So if it just comes up in your recommendation section, you should contact your campus union president as soon as possible. We've been in a loose survey that was done by the union last spring. Of those who responded, it looked like 1 in 5 folks received these types of remarks that are not allowed on review. Our intention is that we will be grieving it across the district to make sure that this doesn't continue, because it is outside the scope of the contract. I think next slide. I think it's you.
Can I have a quick question? Can the recommendation tell you to use like focus mode on Zoom, or can the recommendation be like, okay, so recommend you to record the lecture or use focus mode on Zoom?
No, I mean, you're not under, I guess the thing is that it shouldn't, I think they could suggest what mode you use on that. I'm unclear why they're telling you to record something. We may need more context, and if you want to send that to us. If it's an asynchronous class, then you know, recording it makes sense. If it's a synchronous class, like you're online and synchronous, then you are not under an obligation to record. So part of it is context. I don't want to just give a uniform answer, so I'll just need more context. And if you type it into the chat, we can probably better, you know, if you put it in the chat, we can probably better answer that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, in relation to that question, like if it's an asynchronous class and I need to record it and post it, then I accidentally like didn't put the caption in it, or caption is not like 90% above, then is it like is part of the evaluation? Like they can say something about it or no?
No, they
Oh.
cannot, unless there was and even then, let me say this. If you have someone in your class, right, under faculty notification that needs captioning, right? It isn't that we have resources that you should send it in for captioning, but just to say that you need to caption for the sake of captioning, no, they cannot put that in your review.
But if there's somebody need caption, then it should be there,
If
right?
someone needs caption, then it's the institution's responsibility. And
Right.
so you should work with DSPS,
Okay.
right, to make sure that you can get your materials captioned in a timely manner.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, so if you are a reviewer, things to avoid. Okay, so again, you cannot use perceived lack of general accessibility content for less than satisfactory review. If you go in and they do not have the appropriate captions, they uploaded a PDF that is not accessible in Canvas, things of that nature, they are not responsible for it in this way. Like, you cannot give them a less than satisfactory for that. Again, unless it's a requirement through, you know, a DSPS letter, in which case you would work with DSPS. Okay, you may not use an ex parte conversation with other faculty members who are not on the review team for less than a satisfactory review. So if you hear some kind of crazy thing about someone, even if you believe it, you cannot use it on the review if they're not part of your review team and you don't have evidence to support it. Okay, you may not violate Article 17, academic freedom. So this, if you don't agree with the topic that they, or the specific texts, materials, videos they provide, as long as they're meeting the course topics and outlines as in the curriculum for the class, and they're good to go. They have the choice to pick books and other materials that you may not like. All right, you may not use the equity reflection as part of the review. Again, it's there more to start a discussion. It is not something that you can use as evidence for something less than satisfactory. Okay. You cannot use outside sources like social media to give less than satisfactory marks on an evaluation. It can only be, you can only use the workplace observations and any of the documents they turn in, like self-study, but also not the equity one. So just the self-study and the workplace observations. Okay,
It should be, on that last one, I think it's important to note, like, for example, if you've spammed your whole department with problematic emails and you've been told to stop and you continue to do that, right? That may be something that does come up in a review or in your department Canvas page. So just be aware, right? And that our emails and our Canvas are the property of Los Rios, and so they are workplace tools. In terms of when did the rules on UDL and accessibility begin, it's our contention that the contract, as it's been written for the last decade, that these rules have been in place, but we've just recently, since the pandemic, seen a very big push, right, where we're seeing very problematic things appearing in the performance review, and so the union and our board, I think just even this week, affirmed that we will be taking a much stronger, assertive stance on making sure that there isn't overreach on accessibility, because again, 1 in 5 reviews having comments that are not contractually valid is a problem. And it's a problem that we are unwilling to let continue to go further. That's not to say that we haven't had it removed. So for example, I would tell you that as a union president, for those who brought things to me, I would generally, if I was able to, a lot of times I was able to handle it at what we call the informal level, where I would call the dean saying, this isn't allowed, and then they would remove it. But the problem is I can only do that for people who notify us, right? And so this is why we're really encouraging folks that if something just doesn't feel right on your review, to contact us as soon as possible. And again, you can just feel that it doesn't feel right, and we can give you an accurate answer. And I think Michael's going to jump in too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Michelle, there's no specifically new rules on UDL and accessibility per se. There are some possibly coming down the pipeline in Title V of the state code, but that's still a ways away yet. And more generally, there's a difference too between what policy the college and the district decide to have and what is faculty responsibility. And sort of part of our point here as the union too is not at all that we are opposed to the principle of accessibility. Everybody in the union supports accessibility for students who require it. The issue is that it often becomes a very significant workload issue, and our point is you can't simply foist that onto faculty and add hours a week to their work without us negotiating that. And it could be that some things that the college and the district want are actually appropriate, but the question we need to answer with them is, who actually does this work?
So
On that,
is that you, Deborah?
yes,
Go for it.
absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Do you have a question there, Deborah, or were you just?
No, I just wanted to affirm what Michael said. It is
Yeah.
so important. I mean, we all do the best we can, but quite frankly, there's only so many hours in the day, so much energy that we can bring to trying to create the best products for our students.
Absolutely. Thanks.
But we
Deborah.
should never violate their accommodations, of course.
Right.
We agree.
Although I may have done that today.
Oh no. Well, I'll defend you, Deborah.
But sometimes it looks to students like a violation. Look, so let me give. So maybe this is a good. So I had I can turn my video on. I'm not. I gave a quiz today, and students who have accommodations typically have extra time for stuff, and I gave it in my class, and so there was no way to do that. My intention, however, is to give everybody the maximum grade on that quiz, no matter what they did. Right. So it looks to students like, so I brought that student up and said, don't worry, you're going to be happy with this quiz. Although I know you needed extra time, you're going to be good. Now that student right now left a little bit twisted, maybe, right? But I think she trusts me. And so sometimes you have to be really careful, right? But we're trying to get the education in without violating students' rights. And sometimes it just gets a little messy around the edges. And I think we have to be really aware that we are not to violate accommodations.
Absolutely. And I see an email. Can they base on phone conversation and use it on your recommendations? I think it really depends on the nature of the conversation, who you're having it with, etc. And if you have some questions about that, I'm going to recommend that you contact just us directly, myself or Michael or whoever your campus president is, so that we can maybe give you more personalized feedback. But I don't know.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah. And so just so you know, again, we really want to encourage, and the number one thing we want to encourage is, even if you just feel some sort of way, or this doesn't look right to you on the on the form, contact your union president or Michael Henderson, our new-ish executive director. Michael, you only have 4 more months of using the new title.
I know,
think, so.
yeah.
But all of us will, and you can also copy both Michael and your union president, and whoever gets to the email first will get to it. But there are, like I said, we know that each of you may have very specific circumstances that are unique to you, you and your dean, or you and your department. And so we can best tailor our advice by talking to you directly. And at least all of the campus presidents, just so you know, we are given release time. Your union dues pay for our time. So we are happy to schedule appointments or answer emails, because that's what your union dollars pay for, right? And it also, if we get a head scratcher of a question, it also pays for the lawyers that we have to call to make sure that we're on the right side of this and that we give you proper advice. So, your union dollars, you don't always get to see where it goes like overtly, but this is one thing I could say. Your dollars pay for the time to be able to answer this and make sure we represent your rights correctly. Why don't we pause the recording there? Because I think sometimes folks may have questions they don't want recorded.
Okay.
And then I just want